All right, nothing too original here over last night's watch list, but BIOC is on watch for Tuesday. I missed a great entry today. I was stalking a gap play instead. Usually in the opening 5-10 minutes, I just focus on the gappers, and then I go back to my watch list after that if I don't get any good gappers. So, but I'll show you BIOC looked like this going into today. If you watched last night's watch list video, I was watching this for a bounce. So if you add today's candle in, you can see it had a nice bounce. Now, the entry that I missed would have been as simple as a break of the 5-minute high. And this is the opening 5-minute candle. Pretty narrow range. There's a few things I look for when playing a bounce, and one of them is just a fairly flat open and a pretty narrow range on the opening 5 minutes. And that's for a bounce play. Something that I think should bounce today. Because I was focused on the gappers, I missed it. Another thing I look for is a big gap down, and the third thing is just sideways for a few hours and then an upside break. So this one met the parameters, of that 5-minute high break, and so by the time I looked at it, it was already away. It had already gotten away from me. But that would have been a huge trade right there. 316 with a stop at 299, and you can see pretty quickly went to 380 and actually went a little higher than that. And I do have an example. This isn't something. Well, let me think. I might not have an example. I can't remember the symbol now. WBAI comes to mind. WBAI is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And this isn't on watch or anything, but I want to share this with you. This is something that is down 1, 2, 3, I don't know, maybe 6-7 days in a row, and a good 3 or 4 or 5 sessions below the recent support. Okay, and you see the volume here. So this is something that I might have had on bounce watch. Now I didn't. The only reason I'm showing this to you now in my watch list video is an example of something that is beaten up, that how to play it as a bounce play, and it met my favorite setup actually. Okay, so you're down this many days in a row. If you'd have had this on bounce watch, look what it did. It gapped down. It opened down here below 8, and that's after closing at 923. So if you had this on bounce watch, that's a perfect setup, that gap down, because you're down so many days in a row, you gap down. Look what happens on 2-minute candles. You can already see it, right? So you gap down, sellers come in, and these people are shorting this thing so darn late, right? And they're shorting it on a gap down after it's beaten up, as I just showed you the daily chart. So you just simply take this if it breaks the 2-minute high, right? Which would have been 769 with a low of day stop, and look at that. I want to be clear, I wasn't watching this one, didn't call it, but it is a perfect example of what I call a gap down or a bounce play gap down setup. Okay, so something you already have on bounce watch, and then you get the gap down, pretty narrow 2-minute range, and then an upside break. And then look what it did, it went up and filled that gap. So that's an example of something I might, one way I'll trade a bounce play. All right, so anyway, back to the list. BIOC. Wait a minute, excuse me, I talked about the setup that I missed today, but it's also on watch for tomorrow. Decent bounce, and like a lot of things, it just meandered sideways for almost all afternoon. This was an incredibly boring day. I took 3 trades all day. Didn't have any losers, but I didn't have any major winners either. So all of them won, but had to be quick and nimble. But BIOC just flagging all afternoon, so I do want to watch that again for tomorrow. Remember, this thing had a huge run, 2 big down days, and it's starting to show some strength again. So it's worth having on watch. Now back to SGNL. These recent volume spikes have me interested. Now it's down a few days to support. It didn't meet any entry parameters today, so it just goes back on watch. So this was the opening 15-minute candle. So there's the 30-minute high. Which looks like it was about 292. Never broke its opening, 30-minute high, and so it just goes back on watch for tomorrow. Okay, I like the support below now, so that's actually a pretty good candidate to watch for a potential upside move tomorrow. Weight Watchers, WTW, just getting decimated here, but today was a fairly narrow range. If I go to the weekly chart, I couldn't find it ever trading lower. That's as far back as my weekly chart. I think maybe this is all-time lows here for Weight Watchers. I haven't researched the news, but this might be getting ahead of itself to the downside. So this is an example, by the way. If this were for some reason to gap down below 10, I'd be looking for a break of the 2-minute high. But we don't know if it's going to do that. So right now, it's just in the category of, hey, let's watch this one tomorrow, right? It is worth watching, though. A nice little volume spike at the end of the day, maybe a little bit of short covering, profit taking for shorts. But, it might be getting overdone to the downside. So let's just have that on Bounce Watch. RIGL. I've had this on Bounce Watch for several days. Well, today it bounced off of the 8-day moving average. Let's go to 15-minute candles here. And now it's starting, on 15-minute basis, it's starting to put in higher lows and kind of some equal tops here. So this does become interesting. I would say if you had to have a trigger price, I would say 316 over today's high. But I say this in a lot of my videos. If it hits 316 in the opening few minutes, it'll just have to go without me if it's going to go, because those tend to fail when they hit that obvious trigger price, break of the green days candles high in the opening couple minutes. Those have a tendency to fail. So that's not what I'm looking for, but I do want to have this on watch. RES, forgot to put it in last night's video, but it's resilient. Look at it on an intraday basis first. Look how this thing sold off, and I thought to myself, I didn't have any trade in it or anything, but I thought to myself, well, I guess I was wrong thinking RES looks like a breakout over 14 because it's fallen apart instead. Well, by the end of the day, look at this, all the way back up to 1370 again. So this thing is finding buyers, and I drew a line there. You can see it, nice rally back here from 11 to 14, and really just consolidating since. Pretty strong comeback today, so I still like this one over 14. DGLY, I like this chart a lot. It's just a thinner stock, and I say this, and I've talked about this for about a week straight. I think it definitely needs news. If you dig in and read their recent news, there are a lot of police departments buying their product, arming themselves, if you will, with their cameras, and it just feels like it's done going down. The 200 days held higher lows now, and it's sellers came in on Friday, and those sellers have already basically failed. Here's 15 minutes. So there's Friday's high, and then it pushed through that, but it had to come a long way to do that on an intraday basis, and now it's just kind of sideways. I still think this one goes higher from here. I'd like it to have news on an intraday basis, and maybe be ready to grab it, or since I know I love the chart, if I hear news come over Benzinga or something like that, I might be able to grab it before it really rips. But this one looks poised for me. To me, it looks poised for a little short squeeze there. Very low float, a lot of shorts, okay? And I like the chart. IBIO still just flagging. That's a real cheapie, but I thought it was worth having on watch still. OHRP, I don't think I've ever traded this thing. But 4 million shares today, or almost 4 million, and there's not a lot in the way over today's high for this thing to really run. It gave back some of its gains in the afternoon, but that's a big volume day for this stock, and it's pretty close to breaking recent resistance. So that one just goes on watch, and then I went back and forth in my brain over even whether putting this on watch, but here's why it's interesting. You had this gap up, and it rallied all the way up to almost 280, and then I think after hours they announced a secondary, so it gaps all the way down here. And then after a few days, it gapped up again and ripped all the way to 220 on massive volume, almost 25 million shares. And after hours, they announced a secondary again. So I've never seen two secondaries back-to-back like that. Part of me thinks, well, they should be funded now. So the reason this is gapping up, the news might have a chance to actually come into play. And then there's the other part of me that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, this would be fool me 3 times. So I'm wondering if this thing, after a couple secondaries and burning everyone who was long, if this thing can hold any gains because of that. It's also hard to imagine them doing another secondary, which technically the secondary after the first secondary should be a tertiary, right? If it comes that quickly after. But anyway, so this on a 15-minute basis is an extremely weird chart now. Having said that, today's high was 142, I think. And so over that, the day before that was 155. And so maybe this one gets going. All I can say is, as weird as it is, maybe throw it on a chart and see if it gets any kind of momentum over 142 tomorrow. But it is definitely a weird chart. And you know what? I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to find some gappers hopefully in the morning. And I didn't, there's not much to love right now. Let me glance at the SPY real quick, and then I'll jump out of here. SPY, very resilient, right back up near recent highs. But when you go to a 5-minute chart, nothing happened quickly today. It did this slow grind over 2 hours, then got real choppy, then looked like it was rolling over, right? Bounced, looked like it was rolling over again, and then grinded higher again for the last 90 minutes. But it's weird, slow, snail-paced action in the overall market, so that's why I'm a big fan of trading individual stocks. But there wasn't a lot of action anywhere today, so hopefully it was, hopefully it was a little bit of Monday groggy people over the weekend. Maybe we'll get some momentum. I would tend to think we get some momentum in some individual names tomorrow, so it certainly should be a better day than today. I mean, I did okay today, but I wasn't on anything that was really moving. So tomorrow's another day, though, right? All right, guys, I'll quit babbling, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.